Today I'll be reading Chapter 6 of The Art of Walk. Chapter 6. The Portfolio Life, a New Kind of Mastery. The future belongs to those who learn more skills and combine them in creative ways. Robert Greene. Your calling is not just one thing, it's a few things. The trick is to be a jack of all trades, but to become a master of some. In college, Jody Marberry studied finance and marketing, anxious to leave school and get into the business world. He looked forward to the day he could start wearing a shirt and tie every day. But during his last year of school at Illinois State University, he discovered their outdoor adventure program. He began taking classes and trips with the department, and one trip in particular to Yellowstone National Park left an impression on him. "I can't tell you how cold it got in Yellowstone," he recalled, "but my thermometer broke at 20 below. It was miserable and wonderful. When I returned, it was all I could think about." After graduating from ISU, Jody looked to the road. He believed he would end up living and working the rest of his life in central Illinois. But due to the Yellowstone incident and the mark it left on him, he was determined to see what else out there. For 3 months, he lived out of a tent and explored the western United States, eventually making his way to Washington State. There he realized it's not always voices that call us to walk our life's walk. Sometimes it's places. Tossing rocks into the water at Deception Pass State Park. He wrote to me in an email, "I realized I could never go home." Several weeks later, Jody did return home only to realize what he felt during his was not going to pass. In its own way, the experience haunted him. Within a month, he had packed everything he owned into the trunk of his car and decided to hit the road again. 2 weeks later, arriving in Washington with no job, no friends, and $300 in his pocket. In the next 4 years, Jody got married and began working as a financial analyst for a commercial bank. "It was the job I went to college for," he explained. "The job I was supposed to do, but something in him knew it wasn't what he was meant to do. He secretly wanted more. Fortunately, the long summer days allowed him to do what he really moved out was to do, which was explore the hidden treasures and dark trails of Deception Pass State Park. He and his wife, Rebecca, built a house and began to settle into their life together, Jody as a banker and her as a teacher. But then one day, while helping them move into their new house, a friend said something that changed everything. She walked for Washington State Parks and mentioned that they were hiring park rangers. Before the first box was moved into our new house, Jody said, "I had made up my mind. I was going to be a park ranger." It may come as no surprise that a financial analyst does not have the credential necessary to be a park ranger. So for the whole year after Jody made the decision to become a ranger, he worked at a bank during the day and went to school at night. This fact remained a secret at his day job until 12 months later, when his dream came true. "I traded in my shirt and tie for the badge and flat hat," he recalled. For a year, Jody worked in Spokane, driving home on the weekends to be with his wife. After a year of being apart, they finally sold their house and she joined him. At the same time as this transition, they learned they were going to be parents. Little did he know this little piece of news would one day affect his dream of being a park ranger. "How was your day?" "Last week, I was overseas. In a few days, I'll be in San Francisco, but for now, I'm home, making the most being in Nashville, the city I moved to after touring as a musician for a year. My life, it seems full of variety. Every day I wake up to the sound of my 2-year-old son talking over the baby monitor. Some days he wakes up crying, but today he's a chatterbox. Pulling Aiden out of his crib, I carry him downstairs to make breakfast. Today we're having ham and cheese omelets. After breakfast, we play for an hour, and then his mom comes downstairs to take over. I made some coffee, take a shower, and had to walk. It takes me 2 minutes to drive downtown, where my office is located. It's 10 a.m. Opening my laptop, I check my email for an hour, then make a few calls with my cell phone. Around noon, a friend and I meet for lunch. We chat about life, business, and fatherhood. An hour goes by, and I return to the office to do some writing, squeezing in a health chapter for a new book project, and a quick blog post, which I schedule for later in the week. Feeling productive, I move on to more business-related matters. The rest of the afternoon is filled with preparation for an upcoming speaking gig and a smattering of test messages exchanged with my web developer, who's helping me build a piece of software. This is a normal workday for me. Each is unique, filled with its own algorithms and appointments. And honestly, I kinda like it that way. But the hard part comes when someone asks me what my job is. Instinctively, I say, I'm a writer. But when I tell that person I don't spend most of my time writing books, they give me a funny look. And I have to further explain myself. If I say I'm a speaker, they will expect me to say that I travel a lot or make most of my income through honorariums, but those things aren't true either. I could of course tell them I run a website selling online products, but that I'm not really an entrepreneur. Not like my friends who run furniture stores and restaurants and such. They have staff members and a storefront. My business is just me. I write, speak, and look for ways to support my family. That's what I do. The truth is, I do all these things. They are all a part of me in their own way. Although each task might be hard to fit into one single job description, this is what I do. I learned the term is for such a lifestyle. There's a term for such a lifestyle, and it's not ADHD. It's called a portfolio life. My friend Keith told me, a what? I said, a portfolio life. It means you aren't just a writer, or a husband, or a dad. You are all those things, and you need to embrace them. Oh, I said, cool. Not long ago, I had lunch with an author friend. As we both scooped spoonfuls of gumbo into our mouths to warm ourselves against the winter air, I mustered the courage to ask a question. Hey, I've been meaning to ask you something. If you don't mind getting a little personal. He looked at me but said nothing. I continued. So how do you make a living? It's just through book advances and stuff? They can't be that much, can they? I knew for a fact he was writing a new book every few years. But the way his publisher stretched out the payments, he couldn't have been living off that money. Is it speaking? I continued. I had explored this as a potential means of income and being disappointed. My friend smiled politely. Yeah, I make a little money from each of those. Then he grinned knowingly, looked around as if to see who was listening, and leaned forward to tell me something. Well, to be honest, he whispered, if all those things went away, I'll still be okay. What? Why? Smiling again, he said, because, and don't repeat this, but I was certain he was going to tell me he was a part of a drug cartel and invite me to get in on it. Well, I do a little advising, some coaching, and some mentoring for a few influential leaders. Oh, I said, trying to imagine who he was talking about. George W. Bush, maybe? Or George Clooney? Or I can only hope. But the point, and what I walked away from that conversation with, was that my friend was a living portfolio life. Not only was he doing this out of financial necessity, he was also doing it because it's what he found most fulfilling. Most others I know live portfolio lives. So do graphic designers and construction workers and self-employed people. What surprised me, though, is how many people I've met who found their true callings through a portfolio of work. They didn't do just one thing, but instead embraced a diverse set of activities that formed a complete identity. This is the way the world walks now, and maybe the way it's supposed to walk. A portfolio perspective. By the year 2020, 40 to 50% of American workforce will be freelancers. By 2030, it will be the majority. Some of those people are being forced into self-employment caused by mass layoffs due to the strain of a struggling economy, but others like myself have chosen such a path. Now, why on earth would we do that? People are not robots, programmed to do one thing. We are multifaceted creatures with many varied interests. And though we may like to believe we were born to do just one thing, or perhaps we're comfortable with only having one career, the reality is most of us are hardwired for a handful of activities that, one combined, lead to our greatest satisfaction and best work. The numbers are clear. A portfolio life is inevitable. The challenge then is not whether you should start building one, but one. We are complicated creatures, full of many interests and assorted passions. What do we do with all of them? We are not what we do for a living, but our life is made of what we do. So how do we take this complexity into account? And what if our calling will never pay the bills? Do we give up the pursuit, take a vow of poverty, or is there another way? The basic idea of a portfolio life is that instead of thinking of your work as a monolithic activity, what if you chose to see it as the complex group of interests, passions, and activities? Is it? It is? I don't know. Maybe. And what if instead of identifying with a job description, you begin to see the whole mess of things you do as one portfolio activity? This idea was first coined by Charles Handy in his book, The Age of Unreason. In this book, Handy lays out 5 different types of work that make up your portfolio. They are fee work, salary work, home work, steady work, and gift work. Fee and salary work are the only types of paid work that are somewhat self-explanatory. Okay, I'm gonna remember this one. This is a very interesting thing. Fee work means trading hours for dollars, and a salary is a fixed income based on a job description. The unpaid work, however, is just as significant as the paid work. It's just different. Homework is work that you do at home, like mowing the lawn or spending time with your family. Steady work is an intentional education that contributes to any work you do in the future, like reading a book or taking a vocational class. And gift work is any volunteer experience you might do, including giving your time to a local homeless shelter or even taking someone out to lunch to give them helpful career advice. Handy then encourages what he calls portfolio people to organize their time not based on hours in a week, but rather days in a year. For example, if you need to make $50,000 per year and can figure out a way to make $250 a day, then you only need to work 200 days a year. The remaining 165 days can be spent on the rest of your portfolio. It's a useful way of organizing an unconventional career, which is likely what your calling will be for the first few years. But what if we apply this idea and not just to work but to your whole life? I've already said a calling is more than a career. It's the purpose and direction of your life, which means that it doesn't just apply to what you do, it's who you are. So let's look at the 4 areas that make up the portfolio that is your life. Work. At some point, you must come to grips with the fact that you will do many different things in life. Jobs will come and go, and careers won't last as long as you think they should. But in all those experiences, you will be growing. Every new experience contributes to the portfolio. Long gone are the days of graduating from high school or college, joining up with a company and working there for 40 years before retiring and collecting a pension. In many cases, the organizations where we make our vocational homes won't be there 5 years from now. They will be acquired, go bankrupt, or morph into something different. That's just the way the world works now. Having a portfolio mindset toward work will make you a more well-rounded person and set you up for success in this new economy. Home. Face it, not all your life is work, and that's a good thing. We spend much of his book exploring the concept of that work is more important than many have made it. Our job is not mere drudgery. It is a calling, a noble vocation if you choose to see it that way. But at the same time, work is not all there is to the story of our lives. We are complex creatures, social animals, and how we invest our lives goes beyond where we punch a time clock. My own experience has taught me this many times over. When I married Ashley, she vowed to be my biggest fan, and I don't think either of us knew exactly what that meant at the time. But years later, after having published books and gone into business for myself, I can look back and see how she was a part of encouraging me through the process every step of the way. I couldn't have asked for a better fan. Having my wife by my side taught me that as important as dreaming is, an unshared dream is only a fantasy, an illusion. What makes the journey of vocation worthwhile is having someone to share your passion with. In my case, as a writer, without someone to support my work, the words I write start to become meaningless. I don't like the word hobby. To me, those are things you never intend to take seriously, but we all have things we do for the pure love of the activity, regardless of whether they ever provide an income. Psychologists call this activity play. Recently, researchers have come to realize how essential such activities are to our overall growth. Here's how Hera Marano, editor-at-large for Psychology Today, puts it. We would all agree that play lifts stress from us. It refreshes us and recharges us. It restores our optimism. It changes our perspective, simulating creativity. But there is also evidence that play does much more. In fact, it may in fact be the highest expression of our humanity. Whatever we do to recharge at the end of the day isn't a diversion, or at least it doesn't have to be. It can be the very thing that keeps you healthy and sane. It can even serve to strengthen you as well as rest do. Your taste in music, the kind of books that you enjoy, even your favorite foods all contribute to the person you are and the portfolio you're creating, and therefore make up your calling. Who knows how your past experiences and current interests might dance together to create something unique and wonderful? Play is how we keep our lives and our work interesting. 4. Purpose. There must be something bigger than what you do that guides you through the choices you make, the risk you take, and the opportunities you pursue. In many ways, this is the reason you work at all. It's the charity your company gives a percentage of profits to, or the moral convictions guiding your values, or the family that you're providing for. It's the work behind the work. Although it may not take 8 hours a day, without a why behind the what that you do, your career becomes meaningless and ultimately useless. Some sadly don't comprehend this until it's too late. On their deathbeds, they finally understand their purpose and how many opportunities they missed to make a difference. What a waste to understand your purpose long after you can do anything about it. But for those who are willing to listen to the voice of calling and pay close attention to their lives, such a purpose may be known. Charles Handy once said in an interview, if you groan about your job or find it has become monotonous and boring, you need to ask yourself, what do you secretly want to do? Do it. You can have a break point and reinvent yourself. Sensible people reinvent themselves in every 10 years. Choosing to see my calling as a portfolio instead of a single gig has created more harmony and helped me make more sense of what I do than anything else. Maybe it will do the same for you. What mastery doesn't mean. How do we take what we know of portfolios and apply this knowledge to our own journeys of vocation? Once we have heard the call, answering is not enough. You have a responsibility to not only do what you were born to do, but to do it well. For those who grew up on microwaves and primetime TV, the concept of craft is lost to us. We did not grow with an understanding of doing things with excellence. If it was expedient and got the job done, then it was good enough. In a world intent on following the path of least resistance, the goal is expediency, not excellence. Doing your work well is secondary to getting the job done. But what if doing things quickly and easily wasn't the point? What if our work was meant to not only serve the world, but to make the worker better? A writer was once asked by his well-meaning wife, "Why don't you write books people can read?" He wrote odd, almost poetic stories that few people understood. Dragging his family around Europe while he tried to make a go at being an author, he was constantly plagued with financial difficulties. To make matters worse, his contemporaries criticized him for being nonsensical, even outrageous, and sometimes perverse. And now his wife was joining the naysayers. Some such criticisms can wear on a person's soul, but he kept writing. In his mind, he knew what he was trying to do and that people would understand someday. For him, it wasn't about the money, it was about the craft, about honoring the work and doing what was his to do. The writer's name was James Joyce. Joyce, who grew up in Ireland, fled his country after graduating college, at which point he rejected his Roman Catholic upbringing along with many other traditions and ties. He was determined to become a great white writer with a brand new style that would redefine our understanding of literature. And he did just that. In spite of his peers' misgivings and even jabs of a well-meaning wife, in 1999, 58 years after his death, Joyce was voted by Time magazine as one of the most important people to have lived in the 20th century. When the world seems to conspire against you, and when everyone around calls you a failure, true masters keep going. Even when others don't understand, masters recognize their allegiance is to a higher calling than pleasing the masses. Joyce was trying to do something the world had never seen. He was chasing a passion, and what we learn from such dedication is that what looks like irrelevance now can lead to legacy later. But passion alone is not enough to sustain the work. True mastery is about greatness, about doing something that pushes the limitations of what others think is possible or even sensible. Peter Senge, a professor at MIT, describes mastery as something that goes beyond competence and skills. It means approaching one's life as a creative work. Mastery isn't about straight A's or the highest salary in the company. It's not even about being the most popular in your field. It's about understanding your potential and then dedicating your life to pursuing that ideal. It means doing your absolute best. Why? Because the craft deserves it, because the calling requires it, and because maybe you will be a better person for it, After all, this is the role of work in our lives, not only as a means to make a living, but as a tool to make us into who we were born to be. We don't often think about how what we do affects who we are. Because a job is often just a job, it's easy to believe our activity doesn't affect our identity. It's true that you are not what you do, but you can become what you practice. And what you are practicing being at the job you hate, cutting corners to get the job done, it's time we reconnected with the more modern understanding of mastery. When I asked a successful musician how he went from making an average income for an artist to becoming an outlier in his industry, making $1 million a year, his answer surprised me. Did he write a hit song or get some airplay on the radio? What was it that led to his skyrocketing success? I stopped trying to be famous, he told me. What? I said, that's it? I didn't understand. Weren't musicians supposed to be famous? Wasn't that the whole point of making a career out of your art? Didn't people have to know who you were? Apparently not. In fact, for my new friend, fame was more of a distraction than an ally. Yup, he answered. I stopped trying to be famous and focused instead on trying to be successful. I asked him what that word success meant to him, and if not, he thought every musician should chase the money or become a millionaire. Of course not, he said. Success isn't about money, it's about setting a goal and then achieving it. The millionaire musician had believed, as many do, that fame would one day lead to success, and he was disappointed. He thought he would eventually be able to take care of his family or not have to worry about touring 200 days a year once he became famous, but that has never happened. So he reset his expectation and focused on a different goal. Only then did he begin to see the results he had hoped for. For my friend, this meant more time with family, greater financial freedom, and a legacy for his children. Those were his goals. The money that followed was a byproduct. What is work for? Something strange happened to me on the road to my life's work. When I quit my job to become a full-time writer, with all the freedom in the world, I thought I had arrived, finally doing what I loved and getting paid for it. So why, after only a few months of self-employment, was I burnt out and ready to quit? Work for me was always a necessary evil, something to do to take care of myself and pay the bills. Certainly not was good and worthwhile, and I liked most of my jobs, but if I didn't need money, there would be no need to get a job. I was wrong. And this was the reason why after working for myself for only a few months, I was ready to throw in the towel. What I had ignored was the true meaning of work. During that crisis, the question I had failed to ask myself, the one that we all need to ask at some point, was, what is my work for? Is it to make a living? That's the typical attitude and approach toward work. As a means to an end, we work to live. But we do not live to work. If the purpose of work is wealth and prosperity, what happens when you hit your goal of making enough money? Do you retire early? Some do. But even then, the goal seems small and somehow petty. If self-gratification is the ultimate reward, why are those things with more often less happy? Those people with more often less happy. And why do people like Bill Gates and Bono take what they have accumulated and give it away? If it's not for fame or riches that we strive, then what are we working for? During World War II, British writer Dorothy Sayers wrote a compelling essay called Why Work? And in it, she addressed the motivation for vocation. She posted a particular challenge that was appropriate for her context, asking what society would do with work after the war was over. Many factories in Europe and United States had been used to manufacture arms and supplies for the Allied forces. But that was soon ending. During the war, production had gone through the roof. Economies had thrived. And there was a clear and definite purpose for the walk: to supply the Allies with enough goods so that they could win the war. What would the factories and their workers do now, in a time of peace? How would people walk when there was no central purpose to unite them? Sayers feared they would return to an inferior work ethic, which could create long-term problems for the West. The habit of thinking about work as something one does to make money is so ingrained in us, she wrote, that we can scarcely imagine what a revolutionary change it would be to think about it instead in terms of the work done. If we could make this change and think of work the same way we think of play, treating it as something we do for pleasure, it could change the world. In essence, Sayers was saying that the same attitude we have toward the pursuits we enjoy doing, we should have toward work, going on to say that work is not a means to an end, it is the end. Every worker has a moral responsibility to ask deeper questions of the work, she wrote. We should ask of an enterprise, why not will it pay, but is it good? When you do what Sayers calls serving the work, you do what you were meant to do, and you do it well. The rest is not up to you. Wealth may come, fame too, but those are not the goal. Our job is to see work as a means of making us better, not just richer. The work of psychology professor Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi demonstrates this as a child. Oh my God, I'm just gonna call him Mihaly. Mihaly witnessed how the atrocities of World War II made it difficult for people to live meaningful lives after the war. They had been traumatized by the war and thus had little reason to feel happy. Was there a way for them to find meaning and even happiness in life again? Increases in income, once you've reached a certain threshold above the poverty line, do not make people happier. Increases in material well-being don't seem to affect how happy people are. Csikszentmihalyi said. Sorry if I butchered the name. So if fame and fortune aren't the secrets to happiness, what is? Is it a mental state he calls flow? Flow is the intersection of what you are good at and what challenges you, where difficulty and competency meet. When your competency exceeds the difficulty of a task, you are bored, and when the difficulty exceeds your competency, you are anxious. That was my problem. I was bored, so I did whatever I could think of to make my new job more difficult. And you know what? The boredom went away. Later, I realized the new challenges I had stepped into gave me a sense of purpose that was lacking. This was the same issue facing the workers in Europe and in the United States after the war. Why would they avoid a sense of purposelessness? They needed to find their flow, understanding that the challenge wasn't in producing something for some far-off cause. It was in the work itself. Here's how Csikszentmihalyi described that feeling you get when you are in a state of flow. You know that what you need to do is possible to do, even though difficult, and sense of time disappears. You forget yourself. You feel part of something larger. If the work we do is only about our personal success or recognition, then we will eventually lose interest or become overwhelmed with anxiety. But if it's about a greater good, if we are here to serve the work and not the other way around, then we get up every day with a new challenge, a purpose, which sounds like a lot like a calling. We are caretakers of our vocations, stewards entrusted with a vision that is bigger than us. Our responsibility is not to hoard gifts, but to use them in challenging ways so that others can benefit. In short, your calling is a gift, one that is intended to be given away. Calling is a conduit for life, allowing us to bring our skills and passions together in a satisfying, meaningful way. The road to mastery. After receiving a promotion that forced him and his family to relocate, Jody Marberry moved away from the Spokane to work several more years at a different park out west. He thought his dream was to be a ranger, but when he saw the personal cost, he wasn't so sure anymore. He wasn't spending much time with his family, and his kids were growing up fast. To make matters worse, the park system was in trouble, and he wasn't sure how secure his job was. After an internal struggle, Jody decided to leave his job at the park to focus on his family. Returning to school again, he got an MBA and went to work for a small construction company, helping them with the administrative side of the business. He also relocated his family into town, something they had never done before. For the first time, the kids had neighbors, and they loved it. To this day, he doesn't regret it. But even now, years later, there is a hunger still inside Jody that will not go away. A year after leaving his position at the park, he started to feel the itch again. At school, he would be reminded of ways that he could apply what he was learning to his previous job as a ranger. In conversations with friends, he would find himself missing the walk. Parks began tugging at me again, he recalled. This time, I knew not to let it call for too long. Today, Jody works as a consultant with business on their strategic planning and marketing. He's considering getting back into working with parks again someday. But for now, he feels like he made the right choice. When I video chatted with Jody, I asked him if he had any regrets. No, I don't, he said. Sometimes I miss it, but I don't have any regrets. He told me about men he knew, former park rangers, who had to make tough choices like he did. They had to move their families or get laid off. Being a ranger was everything to them. They loved the job, he said, but many had to grieve the loss of their dream when they chose their families over parks. Some went on to be fish and wildlife officers, others state troopers, and even others school teachers, but their dream of being a park ranger was gone, as it was for Jody, and they had to move on. It's really sad, he said. In many ways, you are a park ranger first and a dad or a husband second. It's part of the job, he admits, but something about it always unnerved him. Maybe moving on is part of the process. Maybe a calling is always evolving, never allowing you to stand still in one place for too long. Now Jody is using both his business background and his park experience to help build the next generation of park leaders. When we spoke, he had recently launched a podcast called The Park Leaders Show, which features guest interviews with other rangers and experts, and is quickly becoming an industry resource. A lot of the job of being a park ranger involves management and business skills that you have to learn on your own. There's no training for that, he told me. The podcast provides such training. On the show, Jody was able to interview Jack Hart, his first manager, who helped him get started as a ranger. At one point in the conversation, Jody said something to indicate that he missed being a ranger. Jack replied, "You may miss being a ranger, but if you can make this podcast work, you will impact more people than you ever could walking in a park." Looking back, Jody can see how everything in his life, even the unexpected turns and disappointments, helped him to get where he is now. He couldn't be doing what he's now doing without the many weird twists in his story that forced him to pivot at opportune times. "I couldn't have done this," he said, "without being a park ranger for 8 years, and I couldn't have done it without being in business and having a non-traditional park ranger story." To him, it's all connected. So how does Jody see his calling now? Has it changed or evolved? "I was called to parks, not to a park ranger." He said, not to be a park ranger. He said, explaining that he better understands now what he was meant to do. Even when I tried to leave, I was drawn back. In his experience, this is how a calling walks. It's something that will not leave you alone, a beckoning toward the walk for which you were made. And for Jody, it came and went at different seasons, growing and changing as he did. Don't search for your calling, he said. Explore, try new things, keep your feet moving. Something will grab you. It will call to you. It's no different than falling in love. You can't sit on your couch and decide you are going to marry a certain girl. You fall in love after sharing experiences, joy, challenge, maybe even heartbreak. All of which could not have happened without leaving your couch, being involved, and meeting the one girl you can't stop thinking about. At different times, Jody had to walk away from what he thought was his calling. He loved his job, but he had responsibilities to his family that trumped his job. For him, a calling is not just a position, it's a life lived well. And perhaps the same is true for you and me. When I met Jody during a trip to Washington State, he took me around his old stomping grounds, driving me to the top of Mount Spokane and pointing out the sights, telling me stories along the way. As he did, I could tell that although he left his job as a ranger years ago, the job never fully left him. A calling does not mean a specific job. He said, I am no longer a park ranger, but it does not mean I have to walk away from my calling. I can instead apply my strengths to add value to the cause in another way. That's all for today. Tomorrow I'll be reading Part 3, Completion, and Chapter 7. If you haven't liked, subscribe, follow, please do so. And I'll be seeing you in my new video. This is Daniel. See you on the next one.